Hello all, this is Group 10 and we will be talking about cloud networks today. My name is Sam Huber and the other members of the group are Adrian Jansen, Kevin Hernandez, and Pedro Gomez. We'll be covering cloud computing and their networks, which includes their advantages and their disadvantages, along with covering load balancers and network security. Cloud computing is a really integral topic to telecommunication networks, and it's only going to become more and more important in the world. Thank you.
Hello, class. My name is Pedro Guzman. I'm part of Group 10, and I'm going to be doing the introduction for this presentation of cloud computing and their networks, the advantages and disadvantages. So as Sam mentioned early on in this presentation, cloud computing has been skyrocketing over the past few years. From last year to this year, it has incremented exponentially. Nowadays, about 60% of companies have migrated from physical media for storage to cloud computing services that use storage space in the cloud for these companies, whether it's big or small, or if they have multiple of these cloud computing services. It's about 60% of the population in the market. One of the most commercial and profitable service of this is SaaS with $100 billion of revenue just last year in 2023. And it's estimated to increase exponentially this year. As we go along in this presentation, we're going to be talking about cloud computing network, the basics of cloud computing. Afterwards, we're going to talk about the cloud development types. Afterwards, we're going to talk about load balancers, a quick overview about them. And then afterwards, we're going to talk about the different algorithms that are used to make this service run smoothly without causing bottleneck or a one-point fault. And additionally, we're later going to review simulators that check that these algorithms and these load balancers are working properly. After that, we're going to talk about security measures that are in this field, in the service, a quick overview about it. Afterwards, we're going to talk about the weak points and vulnerabilities in the service. And after that, we're going to talk about the different types of solutions that some companies recommend or have brought up in order to have secure data for their clients and themselves, like that there is no leak of information, leak of data that will cause a mistrust between client and company. Now I'm going to pass it over to Adrian Jansen, who's going to explain to you about cloud computing basics and cloud development types.
Hello, my name is Adrian Jansen. Today I'll be going over the cloud computing basics as well as the cloud deployment types. So to begin, the cloud network setup is typically seen as a front-end, back-end model, the front end being what the user sees, the back end being the cloud infrastructure itself. A client will access an application platform or infrastructure, which will communicate with a server. Server communicates back to the client, providing the intended operation of that application platform or infrastructure. And we have cloud service types. There are three main cloud service types, which are software as a service, SaaS, platform as a service, PaaS, infrastructure as a service, IaaS. Software as a service is an application that's provided to a user over the internet, meaning they don't need anything locally to use this application. They don't need any local resources. They just need a remote server where everything is held for that application. Next, we have platform as a service, which is a platform of tools and resources that is given to developers to develop their applications, meaning developers don't need anything locally. All their resources and tools are within the platform. Then we have infrastructure as a service, which is an organization's infrastructure that is now hosted on a cloud. So instead of having everything on site like servers, network devices, IT professionals, it's now going to be in the cloud. So we have public clouds as the first cloud deployment type. Public clouds are typically accessed through a web browser and configured through a web browser. An example of one would be Google Workspace. The pros of a public cloud are that you pay only for what you use of the public cloud. They are cost effective because you pay only for what you use and you don't need to purchase any in-house infrastructure to use them. The cons are that the security responsibility lies with the provider, meaning the user needs to trust that the provider is upholding proper security procedures and standards. They're also more prone to attacks because of the fact that they're public. Next, we have a private cloud deployment, which is when an organization manages the infrastructure of the cloud, not the cloud provider. An example of a private cloud would be VMware, which allows you to host virtual machines. The pros of a private cloud is that it's easier to manage security and maintenance because you don't rely on the cloud provider to handle it. The organization has much more control over the cloud, and the organization users are the only ones who have access because it's not public. This makes it more secure that only people in the organization can access it. The cons, however, are the cost, because since the cloud provider does not handle security, maintenance, things like upgrades, things like this, the organization is going to need to pay for IT professionals who can handle this. Next, we have a hybrid cloud, which is a combination of a public and private cloud. An example of this would be a development and production cloud. So the development side being private, the production side being public. The pros of this is that the control of data and applications is much more secure. The scalability is also very flexible because there's no one size fits all for a hybrid cloud. It's up to the organization to design this. Now, the cons of this can be that it is difficult to implement, as well as the cost high, because you're going to need IT professionals to maintain this cloud. Next, we have a community cloud, which is a cloud that enables multiple organizations to work on a shared cloud. An example of this would be universities using a cloud sharing their research. So the pros of this is that they have high availability, they're cost effective because everyone shares servers and resources, but the cons would be that the security, you need to make sure that your organization and other organizations aren't sharing restricted data or intellectual property or things like this, as well as sharing responsibilities among the organizations can be difficult because everyone needs to be in agreement. Finally, we have the multi-cloud, which is when an organization uses more than one cloud for their infrastructure. The pros of a multi-cloud are that you have specific clouds for specific tasks, and all your tasks are spread amongst these clouds. And this helps avoid things like vendor lock-ins. Performance is better with a multi-cloud because you have your workload distributed amongst multiple clouds, which can help you produce an application or service and put it together much faster. The cons are that security across multiple clouds like this can become more complex. The more clouds you have, the more holes in security you could risk. And there's also difficulty managing all these clouds. Things such as data backups amongst all these clouds can prove to be difficult. And that concludes my presentation on the cloud basics and cloud deployment types. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sam Huber, and I'm going to be giving us an overview of load balancers. So rather than have a single server receive all traffic from the internet and risk having that server become overloaded and fail, organizations distribute their traffic over multiple servers. Load balancers allocate this traffic to the servers so that the individual servers are not overloaded and that the company does not need to purchase more servers than necessary. They are typically placed behind the firewall and before the servers, and so that external traffic flows to the load balancer, who then distributes the traffic to the servers. There may be switches that are not shown that direct traffic as well. So once the server then receives the request and process it, it then will respond directly to the client. And you can see that in the picture on the right, that the clients are on the left, and all of them are connected to the load balancer, who then is connected to the servers. In a more complex environment, there'd be many more servers and switches between them and the load balancer. An interesting fact about load balancers is that they can be physical devices or they can be software running on a computer. The software-based load balancers are functionally the same as physical load balancers, except virtual load balancers balance network traffic on the cloud, while physical load balancers are for allocating traffic to on-site servers. Many companies now offer virtual load balancers and will rent out load balancers to customers. This is known as load balancing as a service. And companies that do this are, the typical Microsoft, Oracle, VMware, etc., that offer this service. And load balancers are especially important for companies with high outside internet traffic, or even large companies with high internal network traffic. So that would be on their intranet. And a benefit of the virtual load balancers is that they can scale better than hardware-based ones, as they can spin up with the servers. So let's say if you need to have additional servers to process requests, with a virtual one, you would just connect it with with the program, while with a physical load balancer and on-site servers, you would need an actual physical server to then connect, and that would that might require running wire or even ordering a new server. An additional benefit is that, and then on the other side, if you don't have a redundancy built in with your load balancers, it can then be a single point of failure on your network. As you can see, all traffic is flowing to that load balancer. But one of the benefits of virtual load balancers is they can ensure that redundancy cheaper than physical-based ones, as the customer pays per use of the backup. So with the physical one, you would have to buy that additional load balancer in case there's a hardware fault, even if it's never actually used. While with a backup load balancer, you would just need to run it on a different computer, or just have a small server, a different server that can run it. And that's so much more easier than shelling out an extra $20,000 for a physical load balancer. The next issue I want to talk about is actually deciding how to allocate traffic, and we'll discuss the algorithms that decide where traffic is sent. But these algorithms really can have a major impact on the performance of the network, and improper configuration of the load balancer means that you're not optimizing your assets correctly. So you may be using, you may need to buy more servers than necessary. So what I'm going to be talking about now are static load balancing algorithms. And as I mentioned, these are algorithms that actually distribute the traffic to the connected servers. And these static algorithms allocate traffic without even considering the state of the servers they're connected to. As you can tell, this might not be the best option, as traffic could be allocated to a server that is not working or one that is extremely taxed. And for one example of a static-based algorithm is the round robin, and that simply allocates requests to one server at a time by looping through a list of available servers. You can see in the side image that it just goes, the requests are allocated from one server to the next. So that would be, first request goes to server A, next request goes to B and C, and then D, E, and F, and it just cycles through it. The weighted round robin, on the other hand, is a way that we can preference one server over the others. And that server may be the fastest, had the most memory. So essentially what happens is you just add the desired server more to this round robin list. So if we wanted to, preference server A and have that receive, more requests than the others on average, you would just add server A, into this loop, one or two more times, and it would receive, a corresponding, amount of traffic. Lastly, well, not lastly, but another static algorithm is random, and that just simply allocates traffic to a random server. So as you can see, these static algorithms don't account for the cases where server's bandwidth is already filled and that server can't take on any new requests without slowing down the application. So they really are simpler to implement, but they kind of have some immediate drawbacks. Dynamic algorithms, on the other hand, involve information from the servers and the links connecting to those servers from the load balancer to help determine where to send traffic. Move myself up. This means they incorporate the connected servers' CPU consumption, bandwidth, number of connections, memory, response time, server status, whether it's up or down, and the capacity of links to decide where to actually send traffic. And simple implementation of the dynamic algorithms are the least connection and the least response time. So that's really the load balancer, just keeping track of how many connections the server has, and then, or of the servers have, and then sending the traffic to the one with the least, or the one with the fastest response time. And throughout my research, I've seen that many researchers propose algorithms and there's really a lot of dynamic algorithms out there, and they're really, we don't have homogeneous servers and don't have homogeneous requests. So chances are that one algorithm that might be proposed might not work for every single use case. And an interesting application of algorithms is for data centers. And they're a really interesting case because data centers, have tons and tons of traffic. And one of the authors that we read, he proposed an algorithm that is aware of the topological state of the network. So understanding the switches and how they connect to the different switches and how those actually end up connecting to the servers. So this algorithm actually would see the bandwidth, or would know the bandwidth of those links and see what their capacity of those links are to determine whether it was congested or it should not be sending traffic to it. And he had shown that other algorithms that worked well for symmetric cases of servers, so meaning the servers are all identical, actually had issues when that algorithm was applied to an asymmetric server setup. So meaning maybe this one server was stronger than the others, or there were a few weak ones in there. So when Khan actually implemented his algorithm that included the links, their link capacity, he saw that his algorithm was actually able to increase the performance in the asymmetric case to being about 90% of its symmetric counterpart, which was better than the other algorithms that he had tested and evaluated. And that's a brief summary of load balancing from the overview and the various algorithms that can be applied to it. And next we'll be talking about the network security of cloud networks. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kevin Hernandez, and I will be doing the security portion of this presentation. So to start it off, the purpose of security in cloud computing is to protect data stored in the cloud as well as keep it safe while it is being uploaded, downloaded, and transferred. In the day and age that we live in, security is extremely important, especially with all the devices that we have that connect to different networks and just the internet in general. And it's very important to be secure. Everyone who uses cloud wants to be secure and keep their data safe, and it's vital for companies to provide that. With everything on the internet, there are risks, and these risks are exploited by individuals who seek to steal data or hack the system. Majority of the issues that I'm going to be talking about do have countermeasures that are meant to defend the data and prevent any compromises in security. But it is important for these companies to assess, their vulnerabilities and then provide the proper countermeasures to go, to mitigate any damage or to go against, the risks. So first off, we're just going to talk about the security vulnerability. These vulnerabilities in cloud computing affect the entire network, and I'm going to list and talk about the issues that are common. The first one is data loss. A data loss can occur due to hardware or software failure. It can also be caused by individuals who hack the network. So data loss is extremely important to fight against, because people who upload, let's say, storage to the cloud, let's say to reserve space on their devices, that data needs to be secure. If they lose that data, then they could permanently lose things which include, maybe family photos or just important files that they've uploaded, whether it has to do with work or school. It's very important. A lot of people have that security and they just, they're like, hey, I'm gonna keep this here. It's gonna be safe. I just have to log in on any device and it's there. And you don't want nobody wants all their hard work, to get deleted. Let's say if they work on a school paper, or people with old family photos, like I said, those things are valuable to these people. And these companies need to focus on preventing any data loss. Um, if it's hardware failure, that can be traced back to the company itself, and they need to assess what's causing the failure. And if it's software failure, it can be caused by a bug, or like I said, it can be caused by individuals who trying to do damage to the network, whether by malware or, by purposely putting bugs in, the system. So that's the first vulnerability that I wanted to talk about. The second one would be data breaches. So data breaches occur with weak passwords, repeated passwords, things like keylogging, phishing, and even the backdoor method. The backdoor method is essentially a it's kind of like a door, figuratively speaking, that someone who programmed can go back to and access the, whatever program or system that they've worked on. And it's an easy door, it's very, very, very difficult to detect, and they can just go back in and touch upon software and things like that. So that's one of the ways that it can occur. And these methods are used to obtain personal data, private information, payment methods, and a lot of this stuff can then be used in fraudulent activity. If you steal somebody's payment method, they can use that elsewhere. If maybe somebody has a file with like scanned copies of their social security or their birth certificate, these things can all be used in fraudulent activity. And it's important to make the client feel safe, and not just feel safe, but actually keep them safe, especially if somebody's uploading these files to the cloud, um, for easy access through, across devices and things like that. And the last thing I wanted to talk about here was malware. So malware is essentially viruses and, software that are intentionally designed to attack and disrupt hardware, as well as servers and things of the network. Malware is always intentional, and, the way it can get onto your device is really fairly easy, or, the way it can get onto a network is fairly easy. All it takes is the smallest thing, like a link, that's embedded with the malware, connecting your device to another device. Like, for example, maybe you connect your phone to a computer, and then if that computer is connected to a system, it can travel in that way, or the other way around. It can go from the computer to your phone, um or maybe it can be something as simple as connecting a USB device to your computer. And it's very important to, be aware of these things, so that it's not a constant thing that's happening. Even some companies will go as far as saying, hey, you cannot connect your personal device to our computer. If you need to charge your phone, we have charging stations for this. I've seen it myself at certain workplaces. You cannot connect your device by any means to the computer, because that right there can cause a security breach, or, like, before it can download some malware into the computer. So it's very important to implement things like that, and like rules and regulations that prevent, easy access to devices like that. So the next slide is security solutions. It's essentially countermeasures for the risks that I stated before. They're always in place to prevent any system compromise. And that's important to have in place, and also so the customer or the client knows, hey, this is in place to protect you and to protect us as well. Because the company also has, private information and things that they don't want to be public access, rightfully so. So, one of the ways that data loss can be prevented is by setting up data backup policies. It keeps data secure if anything goes wrong. And basically these backup policies determine how often data is backed up and how much storage there is. You can always purchase more storage, um, but that's if you do need it. But for example, the iPhone backs up on its own, and it tells you, hey, we're gonna try to do a backup on this day at this time. Try to be connected to a network so that the backup goes through. And if you need more storage, then you always have it on the cloud. But it's important that these things are kept secure. That way, if something happens to your physical device, it's still you still have all your data saved. So that's one way to prevent data loss. Another way to prevent data loss that I didn't write on here is, just to make sure that the hardware is up to date, that the correct hardware is set up, you're using the proper tools to set it up. You're making sure that the connections are correctly, put together, and things like that. Make sure that there's no, that everything's running smoothly before, you set up to launch anything. That way, you can try and prevent these things. And though another way you could prevent it too is, with rules and regulations. Anybody who's working on the systems, you can have them sign some papers, and just do your best to prevent anybody from intentionally harming the software. And if they do, then there will be consequences to that. So another solution for data breaches, or starting for data breaches, a solution is data encryption. Data encryption is a great way to protect against data breaches. It allows for the data to be protected when it's being transferred, as well as when it's being received. It makes it extremely difficult for individuals to break encryption. And I read up on data encryption, and it's cool because there's, there could be fail safes to when, an encryption is broken. It can send out a signal and you can see where, where who or what took your files. It's still I'm still pretty new to the data encryption thing. But it's really interesting how it works and how secure, it helps data become. So, data breaches can also be prevented by limiting access to sensitive data by employees, or to employees of the company, and activating two-factor authentication as well is just another wall of security to prevent anyone from accessing accounts, and even important accounts within the company itself, not just the customer accounts. It if somebody's trying to log into your device or into your account and you have the two-factor authentication, it'll send you an email, a code by text, and you'll be like, oh, okay, someone's trying to access my thing, and they won't be able to because they don't have access to your email or to your phone number. It's extremely important for clients to do this as well as for people in the company because they have, the most access to things. Um, a good example is a good example to show that companies do limit associates is, they usually warn clients, hey, your company associates will never ask for your passwords. This usually is big in banks, in um, you know, other things. Just in general, like companies usually have that, you know, as a foundation so that people know, hey, if somebody's asking you for your password claiming to be from our company, it's not us. It's good to be aware of that. Another great way to prevent data breaches is to also be careful where, you put your card information and personal information, you know. If you put this information on a website that's not secure, then it can easily be stolen and then, you're dealing with some fraudulent activity. But it's important to understand that and keep that in mind whenever you're gonna buy something online or even just look something up and going on a website, signing up for email, anything. And the last solution for malware is antivirus software, such as Norton or McAfee. Those are the two famous ones that I decided to put. Most computers nowadays come with that already, and they give you like a free month. If it's a brand new computer, they give you like a free month, and then you have to subscribe to it. But for the most part, it's easily accessible, and it's very good protection. It helps you protect your device and prevent any malware from coming in. And another way, a really good way to prevent malware is just avoid installing suspicious programs and files, avoid clicking pop-up ads, any of those fake offers that you're going to win a certain amount of money or prizes as well. And more importantly, avoid suspicious links. You can throw emails in there too. Emails have weird links too as well sometimes if, it's an unknown sender. And it's just important to be aware of that so that you don't fall into these tricks that can easily be prevented. So that should be it for security. Thank you for your time.
Hello, class, it's Pedro again. So now, after seeing everything that has been presented in this presentation, now we know that cloud computing is a great service that brings a lot of benefits to companies and individuals, but it also brings drawbacks and risks that are introduced as this technology has been used over time and introduced to the public. As Adrian Jensen mentioned in Cloud Computing Network, he explained to us how the setup is made in the basic cloud computing. There's a basic cloud that later is divided into different subclouds, and each of those subclouds are given to a company or to individuals to use with a certain amount of storage, and then depending on how much they pay for the service, they have more or less storage. Afterwards, Samuel Huber mentioned in the load balancer, the different types of algorithms are being used, whether it's static or dynamic algorithms. He also introduced us to a couple of simulators that are used in order to test out that these algorithms are not causing interference or bottlenecking in the network. Afterwards, Kevin Hernandez went with a quick overview of security, what security is, and some of the vulnerabilities that this service, such as data loss, data breach, and malware, are brought up in these services, and that could cause for theft of identity or loss of or corruption of data when reading it by either the user or the organization. afterwards, he did mention some solutions that are used in companies to alleviate or negate most of these vulnerabilities and weaknesses, such as redundancy of hardware, redundancy of protocol in software and in hardware, in addition, antiviruses, and so on. So we just wanted to mention that if you have any question, as Samuel mentioned earlier, you can send it to us in Canvas or via email. And I hope that you gained a new perspective about cloud computing and its possible future in the next 10, 20 years in the market, that it will become, instead of a singular cloud, it's going to be multi-cloud, as we mentioned in the beginning, with the different types, such as private, hybrid, and public, to create a multi-cloud so that we can have more access to different services and applications in the service. Thank you so much and have a good day.